This is a very bisexual video. Welcome to Deadly Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and today I'd like to talk about magic systems. I don't know about you, but I think the thing that keeps me from reading outside of science fiction and fantasy is those books don't have magic in them. I mean, you're giving me a choice between somebody who can shoot fire out of their hands and someone who can't shoot fire out of their hands. Whose story am I going to want to read? This person. A cool magic system is one of the things that for me can make or break a fantasy book. It can make me forgive a lot of sins in a book. It can make me despise a book. Magic system's very important, so I've compiled a list of some of my favourites, ? Some of the ones that came to mind when I was thinking about cool magic systems, and I wanted to share some of them with you today. This is by no means an exhaustive list. In fact, while I was pulling the stuff off my shelf for this list, I realised that there was loads more, so there will be a part 2 to this video. I also have some examples that other people have sent in, which we will get onto later. I wanted to shout out Angela very quickly from Literature Science Alliance. I will put her channel up somewhere on the screen, but she's doing a really cool series called The Science Behind the Magic, where she talks about exactly what it says on the tin, the science behind the magic. It's a really, really good series, and it semi-inspired me to want to talk more about just the magic. I can't go into any more of the science, but you should really go check out her channel and watch her videos because it's some really, really solid content. I'm also going to do my usual disclaimer. Some of these books may have been sent to me for review for free. I'm not being paid to talk about any of them. Again, as always, if anyone ever wants to pay me to talk about books, I will do that thing. Final thing to note before we actually get into the list. I picked these books solely based on the magic. Some of them I haven't read for quite a few years. So if I say something slightly wrong or I get in a muddle with magic systems, please be nice about it. So I'm going to plough ahead with confidence, but I know full well that something will go wrong. So just accept that disclaimer that I'm going to talk about the magic as much as I can remember it. Research can only go so far. We're going to try and have a good time. Right. Crisis of confidence over. We're ready to go. The first book on this list is actually what inspired me to make this list. I think you probably know this is coming. This is The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. Again, this is not the finished cover. This is an ARC copy. This book has one of the coolest magic systems ever. So this is a multiple POV book set in a world called the Drowning Empire, which is effectively a chain of islands. One of the point of view characters is the Emperor's daughter Lynn, who can do this bone shard magic, which is what the book's about. But the book is also about revolution. It's about the sinister side of the magic. And it's a lot about privilege, actually, which I thought was really interesting, and occupation, and yeah, it's some really good stuff in this book, but the magic is what sells it for me. I'm going to attempt to explain it for you. So in this world, if you live in the world, then you have to give up a shard of your bone, which comes from your skull, and that gets shipped off back to the Emperor in the palace, where it can be used for bone magic. To do bone magic, you get shards of bone together, you get some pieces of animal, maybe not animal, maybe some person as well, and you cram them all together and you insert the bone shards, and that brings the construct to life by doing the magic. On those shards, the bone shards, you write your instructions for the construct to follow. So for example, I've used the example before, a very simple construct might have an instruction of, when Judith asks for cake, bring her cake. It is essentially very basic programming, and I think that's profoundly cool. I talked about this in my review a little bit, but I think that what I love about this magic system is it is a hard magic system. It's very clear about how you do the thing, but it also is very flexible in that you can within that do pretty much anything if you can work out how to do it. And a lot of the book is about Lynn learning how she can circumvent some of the bone magic in the book, and I think that's very cool. And some of the other characters as well. And it's recognising the flaws in this bone magic system. And yeah, it's so good, and I'm really looking forward to the sequel because I want to know what happens with this magic post the events of book 1. But yes, this is a highly recommended book for those liking an interesting magic system. Next, I wanted to talk about Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. This is a pretty well-known YA trilogy. I know a lot of people who've read this. I know some people who it's on there. I keep meaning to read this at some point. I know quite a lot of people who've tried to read the first one and couldn't get into it. It's not a series for everyone. I read this at 18, I'd just been broken up with, I was going through a heartbreak, I was in Italy, and I read this for the first time and it just like blew my tiny mind. I had the best time. So this is actually one of my kind of like all-time favourite nostalgic books. I'm slightly terrified to reread in case it sucks. So for those of you who don't know, this book is set mostly in Prague, where a young girl, Karu, who's an art student, also works as the errand girl for a monster called Brimstone. Yes? Yeah, Brimstone. And he sends her out on errands and pays her in wishes, and she goes out basically to collect teeth. So there are two kinds of magic, or there's multiple kinds of magic, but there are two I'm going to talk about, and that's the teeth and the wishes. I won't get into the teeth, but it's my thing about like weird bones and pieces of things. Like I've been thinking about getting another tattoo recently, and the things I'm thinking of are bones and teeth. I don't know what's happening, I just want bones and teeth everywhere. Wishes are also really interesting. The smallest denomination is a clay bead, and the biggest are like these big chunky goldish coins. What I really like about the way the wishes work is you can't add them together. They're not like currency where if you had 100 pennies it would make a pound. If you have 100 tiny wishes, there'll only ever be 100 tiny wishes. I think that's really cool, and it was really interesting testing the limitations of that, putting those bounds on your own magic system, in the sense that a wish can do anything, but what are the limits then of wishing? And I thought that was really cool. I just think these books are really imaginative, and I think probably quite formative in me falling in love with girls who are tall and slim. Next, I have the Broken Earth Trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. I borrowed these from a friend when I read them, so I don't actually own them, which is a real shame, and I may have to buy secondhand copies where I can find them. I'd struggled making this list with whether I wanted to include powers as magic, but they're magical powers, so I guess I'm gonna steer away from books that are superhero leaning, even though that's kind of magic anyway. But in this we have Origines? I've never really been sure how to pronounce it, I've only seen it written down, but these are people who can control earth and temperature. So earth is very much direct interaction, and temperature is a bit more indirect. And in this case they're kind of controlling energy, and this whole world is kind of natural disaster based. It's kind of the end of the world, all these natural disasters are happening. It's a broken earth, and people can control that. And what I liked about this one is it's one of the best examples of people have magic, we know people have magic, we dislike the people who have magic, but they are still governed in some way, and it's an acknowledgement that they exist and can do good, and the complications that come with controlling people who are different. And yeah, this series is amazing, so sad, but amazing, and the magic system is fabulous. And yeah, thank you. I think it was Josie who recommended this in my tweet asking for examples, so go Josie, but go these books, they're great. More books I don't own. This is the Old Kingdom series by Garth Nix, and they've just announced, I think, a new one or new release covers, and they're looking very snazzy, so I'm going to use one of the new release covers for this. These books are about necromancy, which is so my jam, but they're also just really good stories with really interesting characters, and they're quite young YA at the beginning, but they go to quite a dark place. They're not patronising, which I really enjoyed. And the audiobooks are narrated by Tim Curry. I say that every time I mention them, but yes. The magic in this world comes in two halves. So you have charter magic, which is very structured magic involving making the right mark with the right intention, stringing marks together, very structured, very rigid, controlled magic. And then you have free magic, which is the opposite of that. It's chaotic, it corrupts, it does whatever it wants. Kind of the bad necromancers use free magic, and it's sort of, oh no, a free magic sorcerer, we need to run the other way. What I liked about this is it took that dichotomy of there's very controlled magic and there's not, and then in the Abhorsen, who's the necromancer sent to deal with other necromancers, you have the two kind of combined, and they're the only people who can use free magic properly and control it using a bell bandolier. And yeah, there's a reason these books are so popular. It's really good. There is somewhere a pin where it has all of the bells, and I need it, so if you're ever selling one, please do let me know. I'm going to stop very briefly on Bloody Rose, which was a recent read, which is why it's on this list, because it's fresh in my mind. This has an ink witch called Cura, and what I liked about this one is that it was, again, it's taking a magic system and seeing how it would be applied in the real world. So there is this magic called summoning, where people can make a figure of something and bring it to life. And in Cura's case, she has painted these figures on herself, or she's inked herself with them. They are tattoos, and she can bring them forth out of her body. And in this book, there's like one scene with her where she's explaining it and how people didn't really understand why she had done this when there was other ways of doing the magic. And yeah, I thought it was really cool. And also Tattooed Witch. This is a very bisexual video. Next, I wanted to talk about Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. Now, I read this very quickly and I can't remember a lot about it. This is one of the books that I'm a bit wary of bringing up, but I wanted to talk about how there is kind of fey magic in this, which I appreciated. The thing that stuck with me is the idea of the rule of three, which we all know from fairy tale. It's so important in fairy tale. And in this, the rule of three almost has its own magical power. So, minor spoiler warning for Spinning Silver, I'll put a skip if you really don't want to hear anything about it. I don't think it's too significant. In this, she's asked to turn metal into gold, and each time she says, look, I can't do that, and then she does it through various means, and they say, she gets to the third time and they're like, well, now you can do it for real, and she's like, well, no, I still can't actually turn your silver into gold, that's not something I can do. And they say, no, you've done it 3 times, that means you now have the magic power. And I thought that was profoundly cool. End of spoiler skip. This is just a really interesting take on that kind of magic and that fairy tale-y, fae-esque thing. And yeah, good stuff. This is so due for a reread, it's shameful. Next, I wanted to briefly touch on Jade City by Fonda Lee. This is a fabulous story. It's like an old kung fu movie mixed with a fantasy book. It's so good. I'm so excited for the third one. The sequel is also amazing. This is just great stuff. In this book, Jade can be worn upon a person's body and it can enhance your physical abilities, so turn you into like a really, really tough person. Only certain family lines can cope with wearing Jade. Other people would need to take a special drug to do it, essentially. The book kind of deals with this kind of old hierarchy of people who are able to wear Jade, but it's also degrading them. There's a lot of drug connotations in this book and a lot of allegory there, and I think it's really clever, and I'm always here for the idea of magic corrupting. I think that's a really cool thing to explore, and this book does it really well because of the idea of kind of hierarchy and generations and good stuff. Yes, Jade City is good. I thought I would also mention the Farseer books by Robin Hobb. I've read the first 3 of those and then I've read Live Ships, but I'm going to focus in on Farseer because that's where they talk about the skill. And again, we have different kinds of magic in one fantasy world. We have the skill, which is kind of noble magic. It's all to do with seeing far. You know, you can talk across long distances, you can pass information, you can do other things like confound people's minds and other stuff. And then you also have the wit, which is like communication with animals, which is seen as this much more base magic and you don't tell anyone about it because you'll be killed. And I liked that idea of bringing classism into magic. I thought that was really interesting because actually upon reading it they're kind of similar magics, but they've been pushed aside into these 2 very different things, and one is revered and one is horrible. And I liked that Robin Hobb put 2 magic systems into her world and pit them against each other but also brought them together. It's good, well worth reading for the magic. The last book I'm going to talk about in this video, there will definitely be a part 2. I have another stack of books next to me that we'll need talking about, but I thought it would be silly to talk about magic systems and not bring up Brandon Sanderson because he has so many. I'm going to talk about the magic system in Mistborn because why wouldn't I? This involves, again, multiple magic systems that come from the same place. And in this case, they aren't being pit against each other, but one is focused on much more than the others, and that is allomancy, which is where you swallow some metal. If you have the power, you swallow some metal and you can burn that metal to gain a skill, and there are different kinds of allomancers. There is a list of all of the different powers. I think they're at the back. Maybe not at the back of this one. Oh, there you go. So yeah, you can be a seeker. If you could burn bronze, it would be able to see someone else doing allomancy. Or you can have combinations of them, and that's something that's explored in the later books. There's also feruchemistry, which is where you wear the stuff, wear the metal, and you can build up stuff inside the metal, and the later books in the Mistborn series go into how those kinds of magics would work and how you might use them. And yes, it's just, again, it's a hard magic system that actually there's quite a lot of flexibility within it, where the rules always make sense, but there's some room for experimentation, I suppose is what I'm saying, and I really enjoyed that. So I'm going to leave it there at 9 books. I really enjoyed making this video. I like talking about magic, I like thinking about magic. It's just good fun. I'm also very warm because for some reason having opinions about books is now stressful to me, so please comment something nice below. While I sign off, I'm going to put some book covers on the screen that are book recommendations from people on Twitter of books with good magic systems that I can't necessarily comment on because I've not read them, but I wanted to bring them in here because otherwise why would people give me those recommendations? And I'm hoping to read some of these at some point, so if you spy a cover that you think, yeah, Judith really needs to read that, comment that below as well. Thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. You can also subscribe, it really makes me feel loved and appreciated and also lets you know when I make a new video. You can also follow me on all of my social media. I haven't asked you to do that for a while. I'm starting some new stuff on my Instagram. I haven't quite worked out what it's going to be yet, but yeah, that's fun. That's linked below as well. And I will see you in the next one. But the book is also about revolution. It's about the sinister side of boom. But the book is also about revolution. It's about the sinister side of I can't say it. Ow! Drop my phone on my ankle.